It's science versus religion in a head-to-head battle where only one will be left standing. Who will survive? Godless, the Eastfield Exorcism is a Tubi original written and directed by Nick Kazakis and written by Alexander Anglis Wilson. Check out the respective IMDb pages for the full listings of their work. And this stars Georgia Ayers as Laura and Dan Ewing as Ron. And Ron is a very religious boy, and Laura should have said see you later boy because he was a bit too disturbed for her. But she has her head in a different space, and he wants to help his wife. Okay, the skater boy rendition should have been workshopped. Nevertheless, Laura is conflicted. She has some things in her past that she has not dealt with all that well. Things that get revealed as the movie goes on. Ron is super religious, just wants to help his wife who is clearly troubled, and he gets some members of a very, very tight-knit, crazy congregation together to help his wife who clearly is demonically possessed. Absolutely 100% demonically possessed. And there is a crazy pastor named Daniel, played by Tim Pocock, who is absolutely determined to get the demons out of Laura by any means necessary, inspired by true events. Anytime you see inspired by true events, you have to take that with a grain, or rather a tube of salt. And that's not a knock on this movie, that's just in general, because usually with horror movies like this, even with a sense of realism, the whole inspired by true events thing is really just, yeah, we're going to get you in the door with this, and then maybe take a few liberties with the source material. This comes to us from XYZ Films, Tubi, and a few other production companies. They listed quite a few there. And basically Laura needs help, and she gets the wrong kind of help. And from there, we have what happens when exorcisms go horribly, horribly wrong with people that really shouldn't be allowed out of their house without adult supervision. It proves that religious stuff can really, 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 really just work on people. It can poison your minds. It can make you believe that anything outside of God's will is something you shouldn't even think about for one goddamn second. Otherwise, you are clearly evil. So, when I saw the poster for this, I was like, okay, sure, I'll give it a shot. Tubi originals are either good, great, surprising, or they're absolutely goddamn awful, like Titanic 666 or Trinket Box or Unborn or Teardrop. I will say that this doesn't fall into the latter category. There are elements to this movie that I didn't mind. The acting is decent enough as it is. It takes as realistic of an approach as it can towards religious groups just being bound and determined, even if you're mentally ill, that you are clearly possessed and we have to get these demons out of you. And there are times where this movie sort of works. There are also times where I was laughing at this movie, maybe unintentionally, because of some of the scenes and some of the craziness. There were a few moments where I was like, ew, okay, that wasn't too bad. But the movie gets a slight recommendation. I will say that before I get into spoilers. But there isn't a ton to spoil with this because you can kind of see everything coming from a mile away. That being said, Nick and Alexander, I look forward to seeing what else they can do, because they showed enough, promise with this that even though a lot of this movie treads a lot of familiar ground, it's not bad, it's not great, but it's definitely not awful. And from there, we have a horror movie that kind of follows the same beats of most of them, but does prove that exorcisms can go horribly wrong. So it's on Tubi if you want to check it out. There are a lot of Tubi originals that really haven't been all that great. This is one of the more surprising ones. And let me know what you guys thought. I would love to hear from you guys. And since it takes place in Australia, you kind of get the whole backwoodsy thing of, holy shit, there are some really, really messed up people out there. And it does prove the poisonous, mindset that religion will, get in your brain. It'll infest your brain. It'll rest in your ears and nesting. Testing, attention, please. So, there we go. I'm going to get into spoilers now, just so you know. That's your warning. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. Okay, so Laura turns out to spend some time in an institution. Her doctor, Dr. Walsh, is trying to get her help. Laura's on some pills for schizophrenia, but also acts out quite a bit. And this could be demonic possession or, I don't know, schizophrenia. I've known people that have forms of schizophrenia. And it can seem like possession if they're severe cases, especially if they're untreated. Ron is very religious and loves his wife, but ends up getting poisoned further and further by a woman named Barbara, played by Rosie Traynor, who just wants to get the congregation together, gets this guy Daniel, and after Laura freaks out in a goddamn, car, like, all freaking out and everything, saying she's gonna rip his soul out and all this, and the whole science is evil thing gets worked over and then beaten in the goddamn skull, and ouch. And the doctor, before Laura has this freak out in the car, says, hey, here's my car, my private number, give me a call. Then the doctor completely disappears for a while. We do see a form of Daniel's torture methods, exorcism methods, where he beats up a guy, an old guy, and the guy pisses himself in the chair. And then he keeps referring to Laura as it. And then they decide to tie her up. They tie her up in a chair. Daniel kind of tortures her, beating her with the Bible, has a hammer, is going to break some objects that are important to her to drive these demons out. And it turns out it's 3 demons. Or it's a form of schizophrenia and from trauma that she dealt with in her, earlier in her life. Yeah, slap her with the Bible. That'll help. And then he brings in more of the congregation, more of these nut jobs. In case you can't tell, I'm really not a very religious person, and I find religion, quite frankly, offensive, especially this form of religion. And that's the thing about this movie. It does not treat it like these are good people. These are really, really, really bad people. So I'll give the director and writer credits for that. Laura knows that this whole damn thing is bullshit, that these people are absolutely insane. I laughed at a few parts of this more than I should have, so at least I was having a good time. And they eat while Laura suffers. But then she escapes. And then as she escapes, she goes through the goddamn woods. And then that's when Daniel says, everybody prepare a torch and partner up. Are we in 1994 Australia or the 16th century? And then there's demons in the forest, including one devil creature with a burning upside down cross and embers floating around. And then there's a baby crying. Why is there a baby crying? Well, we find out a little bit later. The doctor goes to see... first the doctor goes to see the cop and says, I need to do a welfare check on my client. So Laura lost a child. And then we see why. A kid named Elliot. No, he didn't get a chance to phone home. Oh, that's terrible. I'm mean. We get more exorcism stuff. And then we get flashbacks. And basically, Laura ended up in the institution because she had a husband. And the kid, Elliot, ended up dying in a car wreck. Also, a bit earlier in the movie, she saw a plumber that was talking about poisonous toxins like fluoride in the water. And then he said, things like, oh, your child, it's like, I hear your child, all this stuff about children and everything and all this weirdness. And how would the plumber know that? It turns out this plumber actually was in the vehicle that ran into them and died. So she's haunted by all this drama. The more I think about it, there's enough layers to this movie where it works a little bit. So, again, I will give the director and writer credit for that. And then there's all this talk about Legion, the Legion of Doom. So the kid died. The first husband died. She ends up in an institution, ends up with Ron, and that turns out to be her undoing. Well, let's just say Daniel goes nuts, tries to get the demons out of her, and breaks her jaw and kills her. Breaks her jaw. Opens up like in that scene from Mirrors when that lady was in the bathtub. Remember that shit? And Daniel loses it, talks about resurrection, and then the cop and the doctor arrive, and it turns out Daniel's going to get arrested. Because the resurrection didn't work, because it's not fucking real. But nevertheless, Barbara, Daniel, and Ron get charged with involuntary manslaughter, but they serve no jail time. And Ron still doesn't get this whole goddamn thing, that he was taken for a sucker, and that he should have listened to the doctor and gotten the doctor or gotten his wife help. But no, why would you want to do that when God can save you? God didn't fucking save your wife. Yeah, it gets a C plus for the good stuff. I still don't think it's great, but there was promise. So I look forward to what the director and writer can do in the future. Acting is fine for what it is. Those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm Charm Ricklin. I'll see you soon.